Hello, I'm Will, and Ed is not here today. I'm doing a video on my own, and I'm sure everyone's going to be missing Ed, so I'll put up some pictures of him that we can all enjoy. Today I'm talking about all of my 5-star reads of 2025 so far. I've read 37 books so far this year, so not the most plentiful compared to years I've had before, but the quality has just been through the roof. Today I'm talking about 13 new reads that are 5 stars and 3 rereads that are 5 stars, so a total of 16. I'll be talking about all of them, and it's actually probably a good thing that Ed isn't here today, because if he talked about his 5-star reads and I talked about mine, we would probably be talking for about 2 hours, because not only will there be quite a few books, but we also have a tendency to waffle. But anyway, 16 books to get into. Let's get started.
And a huge thank you to all of our Patreons.
Thank you to the Pit Fighters, the First Swords, and all of the Bright Stars, Truth and Courage.
The first one is The Will of the Many. This has been all the rage. Everyone's been talking about The Strength of the Few, Book 2, which is coming out in November. Everyone is very excited about it. I've seen incredible reviews from people so far, but I had not joined the bandwagon yet, so of course I had to pick up The Will of the Many because I cannot suffer that amount of FOMO. But joke aside, I actually find it difficult sometimes picking up books that are so highly anticipated and so hyped up, because I feel like you have unfair expectations going in. Sometimes I've read books that have got really high expectations. I've enjoyed them, but they felt disappointing because I didn't love them like everyone thought I would. But I had to make the dive with The Will of the Many, and I am so glad I did. This is basically Gladiator if they had to do homework and they were all from very rich political families and had their own agendas, knowing that they were going to survive at the end of the day. This is kind of subterfuge-esque, a bit like Red Rising in that way, but imagine a character who's not quite sure which direction he's going to go. You've got this idea of mixing with your enemies and then becoming friends, and you've got this torn alliances and torn kind of priorities as well, alongside the tension that if this subterfuge is unveiled, there's everything will break loose, and so you've got that tension beneath the surface bubbling and boiling, and it's like a cheat code, because then you're worried all the time. You don't know when it's going to pop off or if it even will. But The Will of the Many plays with that brilliantly, and the characters are standout. This is a great central figure who's got a lot of drive. I felt very attached to him. I think some of the side characters I'm looking forward to a bit more depth in the next book, but James Arlington has a way to make characters really visceral and vivid within a few pages of meeting them. They stand out, they feel unique, and they feel quite organic as well. It's quite hard for an author to introduce a character with a bang, with it feeling natural, as I just said, and whilst it feeling realistic to their character as well, without being forced. That's quite, well, not quite, that's very difficult for an author to achieve, and he does it time and time again in here. Most authors would kind of finish on a big bang, but there's 3 or 4 moments like that in The Will of the Many that he could have ended, but he's got this confidence to power through the book, and there's so many twists and turns and revelations and betrayals. It is really a bold book. It is one that is brave, and one that, in my opinion, has really paid off and is worthy of all the hype. And also, I'd highly recommend it to beginner fantasy readers and veterans alike. Then I've got Gardens of the Moon, not usually advertised as a beginner-friendly fantasy. This is book 1 of the Malazan series, and this is always marketed as completely overwhelming, but don't worry, you'll get to grips with it at some point. You just need to tread through it slowly. I didn't quite feel that with Gardens of the Moon. I think later into the series I will. Deadhouse Gates I felt a bit more out of the loop, but Gardens of the Moon, whilst there is so much knowledge and history that you don't know, there's a difference between not knowing and not understanding. I knew what I needed to understand the story. I didn't have to kind of reference my notes and look back at chapters and essays to really understand what was going on. I thought it was just perfect. There was a lot of depth. You could see that you're being chucked into the ocean, and there is a lot that you cannot see, and that we will explore those corners later on, but not to the detriment of the current story. It was really just very different to what I was expecting. Obviously, it had that scope, it had that epicness, it had that rich lore and history and creativity, but it wasn't as overwhelming as I thought. Again, don't worry, Malazan readers, I think I understand that will happen in later books. But Gardens of the Moon really pleasantly surprised me. I've never heard anyone say it's their favourite of the series, so I went in thinking, let's fight through this, let's get to Deadhouse Gates and try and have a good time. So my expectations were about there, but I hit way up there. I love this, especially there's 2 scenes here which are a culmination of politics, which is basically a group of characters who you see individually and you see their own trials and tribulations and their priorities and their own agenda. And they all meet each other and they're in conflict, but having to do it in a nice way, basically. And I thought the kind of resolution and the way these two scenes played out, mostly of dialogue, but also the internal thoughts of some characters, was nothing short of masterful. It was incredible. Two of the best scenes in fantasy I've ever read. And just reading those two alone, I understood all the hype about Steven Eriksson's writing. And it also kind of gave me more hope in the sense that this is just pure craft and great characterization in an engaging way, and it's not all just about the lore and the history. And so kind of it assuaged my doubts as well. Guardians of the Moon was a fantastic read. I've loved reflecting on it now. It wasn't just one I enjoyed at the time. Characters like Anamanda Rake are just iconic, and I really want to see more of them. Sadly, I didn't click quite as much with Deadhouse Gates. I've also read that this year, but it won't be cropping up in the video. But I will be powering on with the series. So yeah, my favourite so far is Guardians of the Moon. Then I've got Grave Empire by Richard Swan, his new release, a new series. This is fantasy meets mystery meets horror. It is so dark at times that I felt like I needed a candle. This is Richard Swan at his best, in my opinion. I absolutely loved that. Whilst he's had that mystery aspect in his previous series, this is multi-POV. And he drops those breadcrumbs across those different POVs so they don't realise the answers that other people have had. You as the reader have more pieces to the puzzle than any of them. And so it felt very interactive, and that's very clever from an author to engage you as a reader, to make you interact with filling these pieces of a puzzle together. It makes you engage, especially when the story is just so unique. It is just testament on its own to show that I was really hooked and invested in this story, that I wanted to piece that puzzle together, and I was an active player. That doesn't really happen in a lot of books, and I really felt it in Grave Empire. As I said, it's fantasy meets mystery meets horror. The mystery and horror, it's not like they dominate. I'd never market this as a mystery book or a horror book, but it's got kind of that genre mashup, and it's got those elements. Especially there's one POV that's got kind of a horror element, another POV that's got more of a mystery element, but overall it is fantasy. It's epic fantasy. You got armored sharks and people riding them, and much more beyond that. I don't want to kind of mismarket this as something it's not. Fantasy readers definitely pick this up, even if you don't like horror, because it's just a little element to it that I feel is important to mention because it sets it apart from a lot of other books. But again, it doesn't dominate it, and it shouldn't be marketed as those genres. This is just really great writing, really standout characters. I do want to see in book 2 kind of a character more that I absolutely love, but in book 1 this is just lays fantastic foundations. I thoroughly enjoyed it from page 1 to the very end. I love the twists and turns. I love the revelations. And whilst I said I didn't love any of the characters, they were all still really, really good. There's a consistency that Richard Swan hits. That means that when you leave one character and join another, you're never disappointed because each of them has these entertaining things going on, and the plot is just so well crafted. It is just really, really well done. I don't know if Richard Swan kind of plans or kind of just goes with the flow, but it feels like it's been worked out really well. It's got fantastic pacing, standout characters, as I said, great twists and turns, and I cannot wait for book 2 and to find out the answers to more of these mysteries. Then I've got Blood Over Brighthaven. We have a review of this on the channel. Me and Ed both loved this year. Thank you to Chris and Maz for recommending it. There's another book I'm talking about later they've also recommended, which I adored as well. So yeah, I just need to go to them in future, I've learned. But Blood Over Brighthaven, a standalone fantasy. We need more of those. I love these sprayed edges, but that's not why I loved it. This is great in that it's very compelling, it's very philosophical, it engages you as a reader to really question the morals and cultural ideas proposed in Blood Over Brighthaven. I'd say a lot of people think that fantasy is just for escapism. I'd argue against that. It definitely can be, but there is far more aside from that. So I think Blood Over Brighthaven definitely has a political lens. It's never forcing ideas down your throat. It doesn't tell you what to think or what to feel. It proposes some strong ideas, but it's never saying you should do this. Especially because our main character, whilst you are still rooting for her, she is very deeply morally flawed, and there are just aspects to her character which are very questionable and that you do not like as the reader. I hope you don't. Blood Over Brighthaven is a great exploration of, we've got a character, she is allowed to do a test to enter the higher echelons of a university. One woman is allowed to do this test every 10 years and no woman has ever passed. So she's got a heavy, heavy weight on her shoulders. We are in a city that is driven by magic, and there are people from the outskirts flocking in, but they are treated despicably and as people kind of beneath those from the city and the natives of the city. And so you've got this kind of this racism going on and this oppression as well. And that is explored really well in here through characters that come from very starkly different positions, but different upbringings, different kind of privileges that they have, and very different beliefs, but they are forced into close proximity. And so in particular, the scenes that have stuck with me are their dialogue scenes, this kind of to and fro, especially when you're in the head of one and you see kind of what they're thinking. One of them doesn't really think as much and says what they feel, and the other person has to be very careful. I wouldn't say more than that for spoilers, but it's very interesting seeing kind of what's said and what's held within, and the contrast between the two. The best authors really play on that with characterization. Because in life, even if it's not for a malicious reason, we say things completely different to kind of what we feel, to make people feel comfortable, to kind of adhere to social constructs or more. It's just something that we do, and we do think of more than we say. So authors that tap into that, I really just feel confidence in them, and when it's done well, it can reap fantastic rewards. But the magic system in this, it is the best hard magic system I've come across, because it is a really active player and it is key to the plot. That is when I don't mind a hard magic system. I completely get I'm one of the anomalies. I don't love a hard magic system usually, but here, because it serves the plot so well, and that's why you really have to engage with it, and it made me feel motivated to learn more about the magic. It really plays a strong role, and I love the hard magic system here, as well as the characters, the great twist, the great plot. Everything here is just on a really high level. It's one of the best books I've read in recent years, and yeah, Blood Over Brighthaven, I cannot recommend it enough. But you do need to make sure you're in a place where you're not looking for some escapism and you're happy to pick something out that's going to make you question things a bit more philosophically. Next out is Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. This is his horror, but set in the real world. So we have got the 19th century into the 20th century. We span quite a wide period, not hundreds of years, but about a century, maybe just under. Although there are some scenes with a character in the modern day who has unveiled the diaries of her great ancestor, but that's a bit more of a minor part to it, so we'll focus more on the kind of 1850s to 1920s period that the majority of this book sets place in. I think this will be very divisive because of the writing style. It's very bold, it's very creative, and it is indicative of Stephen Graham's craft, and he's an author that really thinks about what he's writing and his goals and priorities, and how should he write to achieve that. So he's very willing to kind of adapt his writing style. So I think it will be kind of a Marmite thing. You'll either love it or hate it. But that's one of the reasons, actually, paradoxically, why I've been recommending it so much. I don't think everyone will love it, but I think if you like it, you will absolutely adore it. If you don't like it, you'll hate it. And you will know within the first 50 pages. So I'm not going to say, read 5 books into the series and you'll see if you like it or not. No, 50 pages. That's all it is. This is about Goodstab, and he is part of a Native American band who suffer some atrocities. And we see him being interviewed by a Lutheran priest in the 1920s, and he is telling the story of his past. And so these two characters, they have a very different view on the world. And again, a bit like Blood Over Brighthaven, actually, this forced close proximity gives rise to very strong cultural differences, and then also makes them question a lot of what they have taken for granted. It's a brilliant exploration of character, and I won't spoil the horror element because I think you can go into it blind. I mean, for me, it didn't spoil anything knowing about it, but some people would rather go in blind and enjoy it more because of that. So I respect those wishes and won't talk about it. But Buffalo Hunter Hunter, it is a character exploration. It is small scale. It is intimate. There are some moments that feel so dramatic and epic, but they are still small scale. I really would recommend this to readers of many different genres, because I think if you like it, as I said, you will love it. It's one of those that is kind of genre defying in that respect. I wouldn't just market it to a horror audience or a historical fiction audience. Far beyond that. But Stephen Graham Jones has a knack for characterization. He really hooks you, and he has got lyrical prose, but it does not border on ornamentalism or kind of purple prose. It is really stripped back and kind of mirroring the psyche of our characters. And the exploration of the past, trauma, regret, hope as well, and fear, these are the really prevalent themes that I think are just explored brilliantly in Buffalo Hunter Hunter. It's one that really made me think, and I still mull over some of the questions that it proposed. So that is Buffalo Hunter Hunter. Then I've got Assassin's Apprentice and Royal Assassin. This is 2 rereads of the Farseer trilogy. These are the new Illumicrate editions, so I'm basically just getting an opportunity to show them off because I absolutely love them. But basically, book 1, Robin Hobb took my heart, and in book 2, she fed it to her characters. She breaks your heart. Even though I knew what was coming this time round, it still got me. It still drew those tears, and it still left me heartbroken. I actually enjoyed book 1 far more than the first time round. I also think that in time, book 1 has been overshadowed by how exceptional book 2 is. With many readers, Royal Assassin has gone down as one of the greatest works in literature ever, basically. And so, of course, with that kind of reputation, it's going to overshadow book 1. So I think it's not really talked about enough. I've done a review on my channel, William Gwynne, talking about Assassin's Apprentice, because I think, as I said, it is just really underappreciated, which sounds weird as it's part of one of the most successful fantasy series out there. But all the discussion is about book 2. Book 1, I think, is exceptional and engaging in the characters. Robin Hobb is discussed as a character-driven writer. She definitely is. But people kind of, I think, talk about the characterization to the neglect of the plot. In book 1 especially, the plot is just intertwined with characterization so brilliantly, often where you don't even realise it. So I picked up more on a reread thinking that is just brilliant. It is genius, where it's natural, organic characterization, often doing kind of dull and ordinary things, as well as Fitz learning many of the dark secrets of Buckkeep. Whilst he's doing these things that seem a bit kind of small scale, interaction between a few characters, there are politics and plot thrown into there that will change the entire series and sow the seeds for further on, and that is why you are so invested later on. And so I really appreciated it reading it again. I mean, I appreciated Robin Hobb's writing from finishing book 1 the first time round, but even more so seeing how she sows those seeds expertly, so the reader doesn't even pick up on it. And then book 2, again, it is exceptional. I do prefer it to book 1 because you've got this investment to the characters already, and Robin Hobb just knows how to toy with your heart. She basically just takes it, she wraps me around her finger, and then she makes me feel pain, hope, fear, pain, and more pain. So yeah, that's basically what the journey is of Robin Hobb. Why is it that we love to just feel pain inflicted by her so much? Then I've got another 2 reads together. That is Jade War and Jade Legacy, but these are not rereads. I read them for the very first time. This is the Greenbone saga, just basically delivering. It's a great postman. Jade War escalates everything that Jade City begins, because Jade City, I really enjoyed. It was a 4-star read for me because I felt it took quite a while to build momentum. It was really great characterization, but I didn't feel invested, and I didn't really have an understanding that attributed drive very early on. Of course, in the first 100 pages of a book, you don't want to know everything about the world, because that's just info dumping on you. But you want to know enough that you know the consequences of events that are unfurling, and you want to feel that drive, especially when this is a series that is largely relying on that, powering through the pages, seeing kind of the webs being tied by different POVs all coming together and intertwining, as well as the shocks amongst that. It's a series that relies on drive, and in Jade, at the latter half or third of Jade City, I really felt that. And Jade War picks up at the tempo Jade City leaves off. It picks it up and it runs away with it. Everything is ramped up to 11. And Jade City, once again, in between those really kind of fast-paced moments, I don't mean that everything has to be action, twist, surprise. I don't mean that. But I mean that you need to kind of, as I said, have that drive. And that can be during slower moments, these dialogues, these emotional beats that are slower but allowing for a bigger build, more tension, and that kind of chart throughout the book that's raising toward a big climax, whether that's an epic action sequences or a confrontation between 2 characters that you care about, either because you love them or hate them, want one to be killed, want one to survive, or because you really want them to be friends again. Because this is about family, and you can't choose family. So a lot of them come into strong conflict with each other, but they also feel the bonds of family and friendship as strong as anybody could, basically. And so it is magnetic. They are drawn together. It is about family who kind of mafia-esque in some ways, but they feel their power being seeped away, and their rivals are becoming stronger than them. I really love the multi-POV approach. I think that book 2, Jade War, is the best for me. I love Jade Legacy. I've heard it's quite divisive because the ending is... It's very bold, but also because this spans quite a long period of time. So we kind of have a lot of characters grow older, a new generation arise, which means a lot of new figures. But in my opinion, that was handled brilliantly. I didn't think it did click with me, basically. But even though I loved it, I loved Jade War even more. And I just think that is fantastic fantasy. And definitely I can see why it's being marketed as kind of beginner fantasy entry point, but not to the point where it should kind of deter veteran readers of the fantasy genre that really want something different, because this is fresh, this is unique, exploring kind of different cultural inspirations and a very different magic system as well, whilst delivering a lot of what we love in fantasy. The mixed loyalties, the twists, the turns, as I said, a different magic system and some great action sequences as well. Then the third and last reread I'll be talking talking about today is The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell. This is interesting because the first time I read it, it was a 4-star read, and then books 2 and 3 are like 6-star reads to me. It's one of my favourite series of all time. But second time round, this is definitely 5 stars in my opinion. The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell is an Arthurian retelling, but set in the Dark Ages of Britain. It strips away the knights in shining armour and it gives us blood, grit and heartbreak. Bernard Cornwell knows how to twist your emotions just like many of these authors I'm talking about today. He takes Dervahl, a much lesser known figure of Arthurian legend, and puts him as our main perspective. He's a chronicler's tale. He's an old man telling the story of the past. First of all, that's genius because no one before reading this has really cared about Dervahl, and so it's not like having Arthur tell a chronicler's story and you think, oh, okay, I know he survives. Dervahl doesn't really interact with many of the legends we know today, and so the reader does not really see how a lot of the stories are going to pan out and what Bernard Cornwell's take on them is going to be. He's not afraid to subvert your expectations. He's got key characters, I won't spoil who he makes you absolutely despise, who usually you love. But I will say that all of his characters, from Lancelot to Arthur to Merlin, they are standout, and figures like Nimue as well, I think are just, this is the best execution of Nimue. And Bernard Cornwell, he knows that the main task is to entertain and engage the reader, and he does that. He has the history come second. A lot of people will take umbrage at some of his historical details, but to me it feels immersive and not info dumpy. And for me, I don't need something to be 100% historically accurate, as long as it's not saying this is accurate and it's not, because that would upset me. I don't need it. I don't need 100% accuracy. I'm happy for an author to take historical kind of liability and turn it in different directions for the sake of the story, because at the end of the day, in my mind, that's what's more important. It's a fantastic Arthurian retelling, Bernard Cornwell at his very best, and I appreciated this much more in a reread because I saw a lot of the seeds that's sown for later reapings that he put so early on that I didn't notice the first time round, and I really appreciated his characterization. So I'm not sure if it would make me enjoy it more if it was for the first time, if that makes sense, but I definitely appreciate it more and enjoyed it more on a reread. Then I've got All the Pretty Horses, book 1 of the Border trilogy. This is basically McCarthy doing what McCarthy does best. You've got the sparse beauty, you've got the violence, you've got the Southern Gothic vibe, and then you've got lines that just stay with you forever. It's got this really deep sentimentality that is somehow just unveiled through basically saying nothing, like a character just saying maybe in a gruff, sad voice. Basically just evokes so much emotion because of the kind of subtext that McCarthy has. He's definitely a man of few words, or his characters are people of few words, but it's what's left unsaid that is far more powerful, and he's probably the best writer at exploring that, because I always, when I do reviews or talk about his books, I say I love his dialogue. And when I think about it, there's not actually too many lines of dialogue, or at least they're not long, even though they may dominate quite a lot of the pages. They're very short, punchy lines, and they're not characters, unless you look at kind of Blood Meridian. They're not really characters going on long monologues. They are characters saying very short words, short sentences, and usually they've got a wall around themselves, that a cloak that they pull around to kind of hide from the world outside. They don't want to reveal their emotions too much. And the characters aren't sentimental in kind of what they say, but in how they feel. In here, we've got John Grady Cole. He's a young boy, a young man. He's 16, and with his friend, he decides to kind of leave Texas, but because his family ranch is being lost, and ride to Mexico in hope to lead the life that he wants. He just wants to live on a ranch, enjoy the beauty of nature, to ride horses and kind of just enjoy that, being the cowboy life, but shown in reality. This is not a romanticism of cowboy life, and it's very different to kind of what I'm saying. I'm saying what people expect of cowboy life is very different to the reality that's shown in here, and that's the reality that he's trying to pursue. And so there's this sentimentality in when he's crossing across the landscape and he looks at the beauty of it, and he's got this kind of grief beyond his age that a lot of it is being lost in that way of life. And so there's a sentimentalism in that way that he kind of knows when he grows up it's going to be very hard to find. So he wants to make the most of it as it is. And there are some really great action sequences in here, but there again it's more about kind of the implications later on the plot and how they change the character, because John Grady Cole, he is not innocent at the beginning, but he's quite naive in some ways. And so usually you have authors look at characters who are innocent and naive, or cynical and definitely not innocent. And having that kind of mix between loss of innocence but still being naive was really interesting to me. Very different take on a kind of a younger character. It's a coming of age story, and that naivety does get lost in many ways because, yeah, this just made me want to go sit with a cowboy hat and look into the sunset. Then I've got Dracula by Bram Stoker. So I've read this for uni to kind of look more into the Gothic, into the Victorian period, Victorian literature. And I've been watching quite a few vampire adaptations or reading a few books that feature vampires this year. And so I thought I need to read, you know, the main one, you know, Dracula. This is the definitive vampire book, basically. And it was far better than I was expecting. In the adaptations I've seen, there are certain characters that I think are done brilliantly, mainly Dracula himself. But the surrounding cast, I usually find it quite weak. But in here, I was really surprised how strong the surrounding characters are. And I actually say, so Dracula as a figure is probably stronger in the adaptations, such as Francis Ford Coppola's, but the surrounding casts are just done far better here. There are figures that I think are terrible in the films and adaptations. I won't name who, because it will spoil kind of maybe the difference that you find here, which I think that because I went in blind not knowing that, it was such a lovely surprise for me. I really encourage other people to undergo that same journey, and so I don't want to kind of steal that away from you by saying the exact characters. But Dracula I found was much more well-rounded. I really enjoyed the epistolary approach, so the characters writing letters, whether to people we don't meet or to each other or just to themselves, exposing their deepest, darkest secrets and their real hidden emotions, which really serves well when kind of the Victorian period is known as kind of a very Augustan kind of sense of psychology, of really hiding your emotions in public, and this stoicism as well, presenting yourself as only worrying about what you can control and hiding a lot of your emotions as well. So showing those emotions through the letters and revealing their deepest, darkest fears is a brilliant way to explore that contrast. But as I said, I love the character cast, how well-rounded they all are together. Although I must say, look, you're meant to be hunting a vampire, or you're scared of these terrible things happening. Why are you spending so much time writing letters? Who's got time for that? These Victorians had way too much kind of relaxation and time on their hands. And yeah, when they really need to get a hurry on, they sometimes don't. They need to get their priorities right. But Dracula is beautifully written. It is the kind of definitive vampire novel for a reason. Of course, it is quite dated culturally in some ways. It was a bit advanced in others that I was not expecting as well. But overall, it's one that, of course, whilst dated, I still think people should read. It maintains its beauty of writing style, and that's not jarring. And yeah, it's just a fantastic story, and one I'm so glad I picked up. Then I've got Beowulf by Tom Shippey. I've read a few editions of Beowulf now, but this is by far my favourite, and I read it first in 2025. Thank you to Philip Chase, who put this on my radar. This is not just Tom Shippey's take on Beowulf, where I think he crafts the best balance I've found between authenticity to the original text, but then also immersion to kind of the culture of the time, and kind of changing some words to apply more to what we mean by those words than what was meant back then. I don't think I made sense there. But anyway, there's his translation, which is my favourite, but also here's an unpacking of kind of the history of the evolution of Beowulf, how it's been perceived, and also a breakdown of each kind of section, which I absolutely loved. And it's not often you can say you can love an academic breakdown of each small segment of a text, but Tom Shippey's Beowulf is one of those few rare exceptions. It is magnetic, it's electric, I absolutely loved it. You can find something different every time you read Beowulf, and I really want to fight kind of against this myth that reading older texts, especially, you know, Icelandic sagas and kind of old English texts like Beowulf, don't do it, you have to be an academic to read them. Definitely not. They are so accessible, and I think obviously academics love these sort of texts because there's so much to dive into, and you can read it 10, 15 times and always discern something new. But the actual text, to be able to understand it and enjoy it, I think it's easier than some modern reads. And it's one that you just you can read half and then stop and read the latter half. And because it's an epic poem, it doesn't take too long as well. So there we go, that's Beowulf by Tom Shippey. Then I've got two more, and I don't own them physically. So first up is The Nightingale, and this is historical fiction that just wrecked me. The bravery, the heartbreak on display. Oh my gosh, it just bit into me, basically. And yeah, that pain still lingers. There's quite a few authors that have inflicted some emotional damage on me this year. But if you want a World War II story that hits the soul, The Nightingale is it. It's reached its reputation for a reason. We're looking at the women kind of forgotten in World War II. There's a lot of talk about the exploits of kind of men in the army and the horrific things that many went through. But the women are usually neglected in these stories. And so we're following two sisters in France, in occupied France, and they go in quite different directions. One is trying to look after her family, her child, and the other is she hasn't really got as many direct responsibilities, and she feels this rage and she wants to join the rebellion and fight against Nazi occupation. And so they're torn in very different directions, but of course families are just magnetic to each other, and so they cross paths quite a few times, and so there's this sisterly relationship that faces a lot of tension, of course, during this historical period. It is a story that has a lot of heartbreak. It has moments of real humanity in terms of that it doesn't just show the depravity of mankind and also the depression of going through this period of such tension and fear, but it also has those lighter moments, and it shows that even in kind of the darkest despair that people can have nice moments as well. And that will lead on to the next one I'm talking about, which is Man's Search for Meaning. This is non-fiction, and it is short, devastating and life-changing. It is about a man who experienced the Holocaust, and he was a Holocaust survivor. But what is so extraordinary about this is that he somehow uses those awful, unimaginable circumstances to look in a positive light for what humanity can achieve. He developed this psychology and this approach that shows that humanity just is capable of so much. And he uses Nietzsche's quote, "They who have a why to live can cope with almost any how." And that's what he said worked for him, that he went through obviously the most horrific of circumstances, but he felt this strong motivation to live for his wife, and he said that just pushed him through. And he said the people that in the camps that didn't have that motivation, he said as soon as they lost that, it physically affected them and their body. And he was saying the power of the mind over kind of how we exist is very, very strong, basically. And it is life-changing reading this. It's heartbreaking, but one that whilst within one sentence you're near tears and the next you're completely uplifted and motivated to kind of lead your life in a different way. I think it's such a powerful story, and it's one that kind of makes us stop going in the routine of life, being bogged down by the little things that seem so big in the moment. And it makes you think of what's really important, the power of humanity. And it's just one that I think that everyone should read if they're in kind of a frame of mind that they can read something as heavy as this. I think it's very important that they do if they find themselves in that position. But yeah, Man's Search for Meaning, thank you to Chris and Maz for recommending to this. It has changed me, and I think I really do often reflect and think at times when things feel bad, I think of this book and the messages within it and what this man went through and what he divined from it, and looking at the power of the human spirit. And it's inspiring, and I think about it a lot. So there we go. They are my 5-star reads of 2025 so far. It's been a year of incredible quality. As I said, I haven't read as much as I have in previous years. There's no kind of right amount to read, but it's less than I have in previous years, but I've still just found some incredible reads. And also call up on some of the series I've had such FOMO about. The Greenbone Saga, I've picked up The Will of the Many, and many more besides that, alongside classics like Dracula. So I'm kind of ticking those off, and hopefully I can get a bit more reading done over the next few months. But they are all my 5-star reads of 2025 so far. Of course, I should have talked about at the beginning, 5 stars is a very subjective term. For me, it can reach 5 stars for many different reasons. It can be for entertainment, it can be for engaging me, it can be for kind of academic reasons, but the core of that is I am entertained, I am engaged, whatever that is for. If it's because of incredible plot and twists and turns, or incredible characterization of someone just sitting by a fire mulling over philosophical questions, it can be any of those, as long as the author entertains me and engages me. And so it's not a hard and fast rule. Some of them are because I absolutely just love the experience of reading them. Some because they last with me and I think about them day in, day out. There are so many different reasons for it. I don't really have a hard and fast rule, but basically I love the experience and I really want other people to pick it up and enjoy those reads as well. So there we go. They're my 5-star reads of 2025. Let me know if you've read any of them. What are your favourite books of the year so far? And anything else you'd like to talk to me about bookish things. Thank you so much for watching. Ed and I will be back together in the next video, but for now, truth and courage, the brothers Gwynne.